So, Chad, I think it's time to talk about how we felt about the game overall and our final thoughts. I guess we'll start with the quick summarization. Do I think the game is worth playing? It's okay. I would say if you're looking for something very basic, I think the game fulfills the role pretty well. I think it has a lot of limitations due to just like typical issues with SNES. Translation's like a little weird. There's not a lot of dialogue in general. So the story itself is not really going to be very riveting. But I do think from the standpoint of the combat is somewhat interesting despite being simplistic. And I think that hard carries the game for sure. Also, shoutouts to the music, I guess. So I think from the standpoint of, you know, just going through point for point without going into too many spoilers, I think what I would say is that the concept of basically reviving the world little by little, where you defeat monsters and you free both creatures and for some reason plants and doors, as an example. You slowly rebuild the world. I always thought that was a neat concept. There's not many games that explore that, sadly. Those games that do explore it, I do end up enjoying for the most part. And I think I overall had a good time with the game, even though there's a couple points I'm not super happy about. But I think from the standpoint of, you know, going through, managing items, managing armor, it's a somewhat simplistic system of you just have, you know, your armor, your weapon, and a spell. And then you can also choose like an accessory. The game really wanted to make sure that you were leveled and did not die. It gave you free access to a lot of things like medicinal herbs. So it's definitely on the lower end of difficulty for an SNES game. I don't think we game overed ever, actually, during the playthrough. Like, granted, I've played it before, but even then, it's not like a terribly difficult game. I think if you don't get all the items, it might be slightly hard. Like, if you don't use the shield bracelet, for example, that could be an issue, or you don't use the offense bracelet on bosses. It would require a lot more dodging. In semi-spoiler territory, the game's performance is usually really good, except for the final boss. That final boss, without saying who it is or what it is, that lag was ridiculous. Like, that thing was eating literally whole seconds of inputs. It was kind of insane during certain attacks. So, unfortunately, that part of the game didn't feel too polished. But I think some of the other areas we ended up visiting were very interesting. Even some of the castle levels were very different from each other as we go through towns, mines, underwater areas at one point. I thought it was somewhat neat. The game tries to give you like little blue gems as checkpoints whenever you use the checkpoint to go back to like the Heavenly Palace, because your character is basically an angel sent to Earth to bring back everybody that has been taken by Death Toll, as per the very intro of the game. I think that portion of it flows really well. I think for the most part, it's neat seeing like when you free things, it does like this little fade away and shows you specifically who's revived, and maybe you'll get a little bit of dialogue initially to say if they're worth coming back to. Like, some of them might give you spells, or some of them might need a key item. But yeah, I would love to have seen like a sequel potentially to this game. There's kind of like unofficial sequels, and we'll be touching upon those, I think, in the very, very, very near future. But yeah, I would have liked to have seen this possibly more in like the PS1 era. I think it was like slightly ahead of its time with the concept, but I don't think with like the limitations of the system, it was able to get as good as it should have been. I would argue maybe something like Terranigma might touch upon what they were looking to do a bit more once they had more mastery of the system. I think that's the closest to where I think it could have been. But yeah. So I think that's about it from the spoiler-free standpoint. I'm not sure if chat wants to add anything else. I'm going to read what the chat has wrote. It's a neat concept, though. It would have been cool to see them do more of the gimmick. Yeah. For sure. It was a neat concept that was, I think, underexplored. I will say I'm disappointed in the female characters of the game. I will state that. I feel like Lisa could have done better, for example. I don't know what they were doing there. But anyway, I guess we'll talk more in the spoiler section with that. So is there anything I missed? We talked about the music. Music's pretty solid. I think from the standpoint of replayability, it would be kind of interesting to go through with some of the areas where there were like invisible items, or knowing which ones are required. It might be interesting to skip some of those. As I said before, the game kind of forces you to clear everything. So in order to like get the souls, you have to kill like X number of monsters associated with the portal. And once you do that, you could seal the portal. So the game always ensures you're about the level it wants you to be. There are some optional enemies you can fight, and not every portal is required. But if you just clear everything you see, you'll generally not really be underpowered at any point without needing to like backtrack or grind. So pace of the game is still pretty solid. And I'm sure if you skip all the optional ones, you could go down quite quickly. I guess in terms of the last non-spoiler thing I will mention, not all the items were really worth using, sadly. There were some really strong ones, like the half damage taken, the double damage dealt, and maybe to some extent the herbs were useful. We did use it a couple times because I didn't feel like dodging. But I do think some of the optional items were wasted. Like, I think collecting like 8 different items in order to get infinite gems is so pointless at the end of the game, because you should theoretically have infinite at that point. So if you've been managing gems well, it's not really a big deal, sadly, which is the currency for magic. I think that's it. I think that's all I have to add there, Chad. Let's talk about some spoilers. So I don't know what was going on with Dr. Leo's house. That place was such a train wreck and in shambles. To think he works in a place with like all those mice and all the cats in there. He only has plants for company. And think too, chat, like we as the character could talk to all these animals, but Dr. Leo presumably couldn't talk to all these animals. So he's just some kind of like weirdo out in the middle of nowhere, where he has like pipes dripping water into his own house. He's got some kind of hell machine in his basement. And essentially, he's just surrounded by tons of critters and a completely decrepit, floor broken area. It was quite something. I love that I think my favorite dungeon for sure was the Dr. Leo's house. Not the basement portions so much, but the toy or the model of the town, I think was my favorite place. Yeah, what was with the church? Did he like make the mouse church? Or did the mice make it? Did he not think that was weird? It's just so weird. I'm just like, why is the mouse at the altar? I'm like, wait a minute, it is a church. What is going on? Yeah, poor Turbo. We did him so dirty. I love how the game is like, you know, it has like gravestones and talks about like, you know, having another life, you're gonna end up basically being reincarnated into other ones. And throughout the game, we see people that become animals or animals that become other animals. Turbo, we just straight up robbed his grave, and then we basically put him in a pen, because I think he came back as a goat at the end, allegedly, I would assume. So his life sucks, Chad. I think Turbo got one of the worst deals ever. Favorite part of the game was definitely Dr. Leo detonating and destroying the queen. That was one of my favorite moments of the game, for sure. It is kind of sad that we did all the unlocks for like the dancers and stuff, and all they did was like a very basic dance, and we got no items. The mermaid dancers were the biggest letdown of the game, for sure. They literally just moved up and down in a straight line. They took line dancing very literally, I think. Disappointing, chat. Not worth. Sadly, the snail races, I don't think we could re-enable them, or I missed the NPC. I thought the NPC was waiting right near them, but maybe because I left, I did something weird to them. Who knows? There weren't like a ton of bugs throughout the game. I think some of it was intentional, like when we did the sword swings and we hit really far diagonal. I think that's intended. I don't think it's intended to stun lock like it does, though. Like, I think the range was always intended, but like you clearly do like way more damage on one side of your body than the other. And it's not like where you're swiping to, it's like where your hand hovers after you swipe. that does the most damage. Just a little odd, but you could get used to it. Yeah, like this could have been a very interesting, as I said before, PS1 game where they could have had like kind of side quests and stuff like that. I see like elements of this game in something like Dark Cloud. I think that's why I like Dark Cloud, even though that game is also kind of jank. I just feel like it expands upon what Soulblazer did. And I kind of view Dark Cloud as like the actual spiritual successor to the game, where I think it does everything this game was trying to do, but in like a more modern console. Although that's PS2, but yeah, but just think about it. Like if you compare the two games, like both of them have you basically reviving the world against a magical being. Technically, some of the people had mini quests in this one in order to advance the plot. Like you needed a key to go in the tower, for example, and to get to the key, you have to get a harp string, which you learn about from another guy that you rescue, and things like that. Whereas Dark Cloud did more like you placed the buildings yourself, and then also they had personal requests, and you got items for everybody. So maybe we'll revisit something like a Dark Cloud 2. Because I heard the tone of the game was different, so I've been very hesitant to try it, even though I think I would like the concept of it. So maybe we'll give it a shot next year. I don't plan on starting it this month. I think from the standpoint of Enix games, we saw a lot of sprite reuse and sound reuse, which is fine. Like that's, you know, that's a pretty common practice. You don't want to do necessarily everything from scratch. So we ended up playing ActRaiser, and we basically heard a whole lot of sound effects that were like 1-for-1 between those two games. And we saw a couple of graphics that were somewhat similar between games. So it's good that they saved a little bit of money here and there. But we'll see. I do think the next game that we're gonna play, which is considered the spiritual successor, not technically a sequel, would be Illusion of Gaia. So we'll be playing that game next, and then we'll circle back, because I think that game's story has a lot more text and polish than I would say this one did. So I feel like we could see a gradual evolution of them getting more used to programming for the SNES. And it's definitely a shame, you know, this one came, like, they had to start somewhere kind of things, and it has that feel to it. It's still like an overall mostly solid game. Like, basic boss patterns are fairly simple. The game is only really punishing if you don't grab optional items. And I think, you know, for what it was, you know, I could see people running it and having a good time back in the 90s kind of deal. So it kind of fits that thing. It's like just long enough that most people would probably need to extend the rental period. I was trying to think of it from that standpoint, because there's a lot of games that are notoriously there to stop it from being like a one-day rental. But I don't think this game did like a whole bunch of that, which is good. You have to put yourself back in that blockbuster mentality when you view some of these SNES games. If you're wondering why some of them feel weird, you're like, just remember things like the Nintendo Hotline were a thing. But I think this one mostly respected our time, at least, so that was nice. So I don't think I have any additional thoughts for the game itself. We're just listening to the end credit scene and looking at the thing. But yeah, just remember, chat, you could do better. You could do better with the women writing, which I think we'll see. I think we will see better characters that are both male and female in the next game. We need to make sure that that you don't just believe and put all of your happiness in an angel returning to Earth. I'm just saying, chat. I'm like, you could do better. You could do better, Lisa. Come on. She's literally turning to heaven for her solutions. Like, I don't know. I don't know if that was the right message we should be getting from the game. Also, I guess I will say, though, the king, even though he did get punished briefly, he could have just kept all of his money, by the way, chat. Think about how funny that would have been if we did everything to save the world, and he's like, yeah, I got all this gold, it's mine now, bye. Right? Like, the king technically got almost everything he wanted. He even got rid of the evil wife. I mean, he was living at large, chat. Thoughts and prayers, live, love, laugh, Lisa, pretty much. Just, I don't know. So we'll see. The game was definitely pushing this huge theme of like, I guess the theme of the game was tools. Tools are tools. It's how we use them that determine, you know, who we are as a society and culture. We'll be seeing a lot of more philosophical thoughts in the next game for sure. This kind of was very blunt with it. It was not very subtle. So it's just kind of like, you know, the tools are only evil because man is evil kinds of things, and that tools ruin the culture, blah blah blah. So we'll see. We'll see elements and shades of that, but it'll be more nuanced, I promise, the next game, rather than it being there. I also thought it was really funny when the king was like quoting the kill one person and you're a murder, kill 100 and you're a king. I was like, oh, okay. I was not expecting that in a game, to be honest with you. But yeah, the king basically got away with it, chat. He didn't even get deposed. Seriously, he had like the best ending. He then got to see possibly as like a benevolent ruler, chat, and he has like a lasting empire, and he didn't even lose the throne. We're the true losers in the story, chat. I'm pretty sure. We definitely got hosed. But anyway, I don't think I have anything else to add now at this point. So I think we're going to conclude our final thoughts, and stick around, chat. We'll chat for a little bit after this, but I don't have anything in addition to add. So with that, I'm going to say thank you all for watching, and hope to see you again in the next game.